Harbor Town is a small town on Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. In 40 years, no one has disappeared here without a trace. On March 3, 2008, everything changed. A famous married couple disappeared from their home and there was no trace of them. They seem to have vanished, leaving the small town in a state of bewilderment. It's up to Sheriff Tanner and his detective to find out. John and Elizabeth Calvert have lived in Harbor Town for many years. Everyone knew them. After all, it is a small island town where everyone knows everyone. However, no one had ever heard of them being able to leave suddenly. Tony Gibas, the chief engineer at the yacht club, hasn't seen or spoken to them since Monday night. He claims they never left without giving anyone notice. Liz was supposed to go to the office in Savannah on Tuesday, and John was supposed to meet Tony, but no one was able to reach them. When the friends of the Calverts realized that they had disappeared, they decided to check on their yacht where they lived. However, John and Liz appeared to have vanished. John and Liz were an unusual couple. She an extrovert, he an introvert, but their differences complemented each other, and it didn't bother them. They had come to the island from Atlanta with the intention of running the local yacht harbor they had purchased. They had no children, but their work at the city harbor was their passion, and they put their whole soul into it. Their employees were like family to them. On March 4, 2008, the police received a report of their disappearance in the Hilton Head area. This was a rare occurrence in the neighborhood, so the disappearance caused concern among Harbor Town residents. Beaufort County investigators decided to examine the Calverts' yacht, and police officers with dogs walked around the yacht and dock, hoping to find signs of a struggle or evidence of a crime. However, there were no signs of a struggle or documentation of their departure. Everything looked quite normal, as if they had just left and would be back soon. Officers thoroughly checked and searched everything they could to find out what had happened to the Calverts. They checked local lockups and hospitals, but that was inconclusive. They also obtained warrants to access information from John and Liz's cell phones in hopes of finding out their whereabouts. But that took several days. In the meantime, detectives interviewed friends and acquaintances of the Calverts and learned that they had been acting completely normal the night before they disappeared. Detectives, researching the timeline of events, found that Liz had met up with friend Allie Theus at lunch on Monday. Allie was a realtor in Savannah, and they were discussing the Calverts' plans to buy a house in the area. John and Liz were also considering the idea. Liz informed her friend that they were meeting that evening with Dennis Gerwin, an accountant who handled the finances of their yacht harbor in Harbor Town. The detectives met with Dennis and found that their meeting was a standard business meeting that went well. In the evening, they got into their car and drove to a restaurant. Dennis stated that afterward he went home, had dinner, and had a normal evening. Officers focused on locating the couple's vehicle, a silver Mercedes-Benz that had been reported missing. It turned out that the car had a GPS sensor installed, but it was disabled, making it difficult to locate them. Their investigation led them to the local airport, where they found the Calverts' private plane in the terminal. It was parked covered with a tarp and apparently hadn't been used in quite some time. Detectives found a surprising thing. John Calvert had left the Savannah airport the same day they were reported missing and arrived in Tulsa, Oklahoma on a scheduled flight. This raised questions, as John had no intention of flying alone. The search now extended westward to Tulsa, where they were trying to find Elizabeth. However, nothing connected her to the place. The officers began to suspect that John might have killed his wife and gone into hiding. But it soon became clear that the John Calvert they found turned out to be another man with the same name. The investigation is back to square one, and now South Carolina FBI agents have joined the search. John and Elizabeth Calvert had not been seen since Monday evening, and their answering machine was flooded with messages. The news shocked the local community, and their disappearance became a front-page story in every newspaper. Friends and co-workers of the Calverts actively engaged with the press in an effort to spread the word about the disappearance. But as time went on, tensions only grew. They began to fear that the Calverts would never be seen again, and began to worry that they were gone forever. Police focused on finding the Calverts' car. Despite their best efforts, the search was fruitless. Finally, the car was found in the parking lot outside the Litter Dunes Hotel, covered with branches to make it difficult to locate. A search of the trunk revealed it to be empty, which was a relief to the police. However, brown stains were found on the bodywork, which forensic investigators began examining for possible origins, including checking for blood. The Calverts' accountant said they had gone out to dinner after the meeting. But there was no sign of a second person in the car, and the passenger seat was littered with coffee cups, which seemed odd. These details put the investigation back on new tracks. Officers questioned hotel employees to see if the Calverts had been at the hotel or restaurant, but their presence there was not confirmed. They also learned that there were no security cameras in the parking lot, making it harder to determine exactly how the car ended up there. At this time, they received a call from a local resident who reported strange gunshot sounds and a strange odor on the night of the Calverts' disappearance. This call added new aspects to the investigation, raising suspicions of a possible murder. Officers began looking for bodies in unpopulated areas where the perpetrator would presumably have disposed of them. They were soon informed of a strange odor near the beach that resembled the smell of decomposing bodies. Although police searched the area, no bodies were found, but the odor remained. The investigation included checking all local landfills to rule out the possibility that the bodies had been disposed of. This led to a shocking discovery. They discovered that the search for the Calverts could lead detectives to the Jessup George City dump where all the garbage is dumped. Police continued to look for any leads that might lead to John and Elizabeth Calvert. Using specially trained canine dogs, they quickly searched the junkyard, but found no evidence related to the Calverts. With each passing day, the likelihood of finding them alive became less and less likely. Forensic analysis of the car was also inconclusive. No traces of blood or DNA were found to aid in the investigation. Detectives were at an impasse, and tensions around the case only grew as the Calverts' loved ones demanded answers. Suddenly, there was an unusual call from colleagues in the Northern District of the Port Royal Police Department. They reported that a woman had come to them with important information about the Calverts. She claimed to know what had happened to them. The woman claimed that her lover, a hitman named Frank Hargreaves, told her that he had killed the Calverts on Hilton Head Island and buried them on his property using a bulldozer. The woman agreed to a polygraph and passed, making her story seem plausible. The police decided to record their conversation, and the woman organized a meeting with Frank in a restaurant where he confirmed her story, describing the details of the murder. However, Frank later admitted that everything was a fabrication, and he had nothing to do with the Calverts' disappearance. The police searched his property but found nothing to corroborate his story. The investigation continued, and the police obtained data on the Calverts' phone calls on the day of the disappearance. It turned out that the last people to use the phone were John and Elizabeth before meeting with their accountant, Dennis Gerwin. He became a key witness, the last person to see the Calverts alive. However, when police attempted to question Gerwin, he showed up with an attorney and stopped cooperating. Instead, detectives began checking his entourage, including business partner Robert Letter. It turned out that Letter had seen Dennis the day the Calverts disappeared, and that provided a new lead. He claimed he was helping move furniture, not meeting with the Calverts. Police also discovered that on the night of the disappearance, Lederer had received a ticket from security at the business center, indicating his presence at that moment at a location other than the crime scene. From additional information received from Robert Letter, police noticed a woman he had seen in Dennis Gerwin's office. After speaking with a co-worker of Gerwin's, it was learned that she went to his home on Monday afternoon, about the time the Calverts went missing. According to her, when they arrived at Gerwin's house, he went inside briefly and came out empty-handed. On that day, they also stopped by a construction store, where Gerwin had purchased several packages of covering material. Gerwin explained the purchase of the material by saying he was going to paint the walls, but the officers interviewed claimed he had never done such a job on his own. The material may have been used to wrap victims' bodies for easy removal and to cover up evidence of the crime. Gerwin bought the covering material only an hour before the meeting with the Calverts, and then returned to the office with his female co-worker. She offered to help him with the packages, but he declined her assistance. After analyzing Dennis Gerwin's phone records in detail and reviewing surveillance video, police found inconsistencies in his testimony. During his initial interview with police, Gerwin claimed that after meeting with the Calverts, he drove straight home. However, surveillance video at the gas station showed that he was there an hour earlier than he told police. In addition, Gerwin testified that after dinner at home, he drove to the pharmacy at 10 p.m. to buy a Band-Aid for a cut on his hand. Video footage from the pharmacy showed that he visited it 3 hours earlier than he told police, which coincides with the time he met with the Calverts. Not only did he buy a Band-Aid, but he returned later to get medical gloves. These inconsistencies confirm that Gerwin gave false testimony about his movements that evening. Police are now focused on checking surveillance footage at the business center, where one of the recordings shows him walking past a restaurant at midnight. Contrary to the lack of video footage that might reveal the details of the meeting with the Calverts and why their phones were turned off, Dennis Gerwin's strange behavior was obvious. He was wandering aimlessly between the center building and the parking lot, looking like he was thinking about something. Analyzing the call records had heightened suspicions against him, especially after the Calverts' disappearance. His phone had been off for a full 12 hours, which seemed suspicious, given that it might have prevented tracking his movements during that time. The purchase of gloves and covering material, as well as the presence of a cut on his hand, indicated that he was hiding something about the meeting with the Calverts. Ultimately, when detectives came to search his home, they did not find the gloves and material mentioned, but did find a shovel with soil on the blade in the garage and an empty gun cobra in the bedroom. They found no evidence of a broken wine bottle or its contents, adding to questions about a hand injury similar to what might have been sustained from a firearm. Officers were already preparing to publicly declare Dennis Gerwin a suspect in the Calverts' disappearance. Sheriff Tanner called a press conference on March 11th, but their strategy was disrupted by a sudden event. The disappearance of the Calverts shocked the local community, and people gathered in Havana that day to express their grief and support for each other. At some point, several officers stood up and one by one began to leave the gathering place very quickly, even running, which caused bewilderment among those present. Soon it became known that the body of Dennis Gerwin had been found. It turned out that Dennis had stayed in one of the houses he rented with the permission of his business partners while he was having his main house cleaned. After receiving no response to calls and not recognizing his location, his partner entered the house with a spare key and discovered his body in the bathroom, which was locked. After notifying lawyers of the incident, they contacted the sheriff's department to break down the door and check on Dennis's condition. The Beaufort County Sheriff's Office announced that Dennis Gerwin was found dead in a bathroom. The cause of death was multiple cuts on his neck, arms, and thighs. The knife used to inflict those wounds was found in the bathtub and was found to have been brought home by Gerwin himself. At the time of discovery, officers were unable to determine if this was a homicide case or if Dennis had self-inflicted the injuries. Forensic experts from the Medical University of South Carolina later concluded that the wounds were self-inflicted by Gerwin at the scene. In addition, 2 packages of potent drugs, an empty wine bottle, and 2 notes were found. One of the notes was on the bed and the other on the sink. In the suicide notes, Dennis admitted to embezzling $2 million worth of his client's money, including the Calverts' money. He also wrote, "From the beginning, I was aware of all the risks, and I believe this outcome is the only right one. I request that my cremation be held without honors and that no memorial services be held." It all happened in Saipies. The suicide notes he left did not reveal what had happened to John and Liz or where they were now. Most curious, however, was that he did not deny his involvement in their disappearance. Sheriff Tanner stated that all the evidence the police had against Gerwin was circumstantial, but there was a theory that the Calverts had come to this meeting to discuss Gerwin's abuse. That could have been the motive for their murder. Money can be the impetus for people to do terrible things. In this case, the Calverts probably pulled the trigger by pointing out Gerwin's misdeeds, which they knew about from bank records and conversations with those who knew Dennis. Detectives learned that he frequently dated women who provided paid services and liked to gamble. Officers believed this could have led to a cash shortage, which John and Liz could have noticed in the accounting department. Despite all the evidence police have indicating that Dennis Gerwin died on his own, some such as Peggy Winters, who knew Gerwin for 20 years, disagree. She believes that he could not have done such a thing, even though he had many problems in his life. Dennis was a respected member of the local community, and detectives think he felt cornered when he realized his shady dealings were starting to come to light. Perhaps he decided he'd rather die than fall from his pedestal, a shovel full of earth found in his garage. His phone turned off for 12 hours and more. According to police, clearly indicate that the Calverts' bodies are somewhere in a county known only to Dennis Gerwin. Perhaps one day officers will find them. Thank you for watching. Next time, we'll have something even more interesting for you, so subscribe and stay tuned for updates. Until next time.